So I traditionally finish up the year by booking at Graffiti Art and Street Art in the Grade 10 course. And then the final project is usually a self-portrait that you do in kind of the style of your choice. Obviously, this year we just didn't have time to get around to that, but I still wanted to go ahead and give you the art history lesson, especially with the current political times that are happening both in Canada, the US, and around the world. Street art is really prominent these days. So, to kind of back it up a bit, if you go back through history, um, this is examples of ancient graffiti. So this is Vesuvius, Mount Vesuvius, and in southern Italy, and this is Pompeii. And what happened is that when when Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, the volcanic ash completely covered to Herculaneum and Pompeii, but they've done extensive digging at Pompeii. In fact, the students from ENSS have gone there on trips in the past, and you can see the graffiti still all over the place. So the word graffiti comes from the translation of scratches, which was the original method that was used in Roman times. And it was completely accepted in that culture. It wasn't considered defacement. And most of the examples that we have are still intact, and because they were scratched in the stone. And a lot of them are political. That's what they were mainly used for at the time. Um, you always get the debate in modern society is it vandalism or is it art? So usually depends who you ask. Some people think it's all vandalism and some people think it's all art. Usually we would have a little discussion about this. In my mind, if you're going on to like private property and you're just tagging it, that's more of a vandalism as opposed to the more acceptable street art that we'll now take a look at. So usually they define the lettering itself in three different styles. So I said the tag style you'll recognize. This top one is just a really quick version. And especially tagging is just the idea of different groups of people going like, I've been here, no, I've been here, though this is my area. Throw up style, again, super quick method. And remember, they have to have these quick methods because most of the places that are being tagged, it's illegal to do so. So you've just got to, take the spray paint and up you go to get in and out of there as fast as you can. Wild style, it's called that because it's really hard to read. That's the really more complicated stuff. And so if you're ever sitting at the railroad crossings, when the trains go by, there's some pretty cool stuff that gets put on the side of those, and they have a lot more time to do it because they're accessing those train cars when no one else is around, and they've got the time that they can go ahead and put into the work that they do. So looking at street artists are more the acceptable kind of art in our society, and Banksy is by far the most famous street artist. And so Banksy is a pseudonym, right? Like his identity is not known. There's a whole documentary, if you're interested in this stuff, called Exit Through the Gift Shop. And he has always used his art to encourage thoughts on culture, government, ethics. I really liked this quote of his. He wrote, "The people who truly deface our neighborhoods are the companies that scrawl their giant slogans across buildings and buses trying to make us feel inadequate unless we buy their stuff. They expect to be able to shout their message in your face from every available surface, but you're never allowed to answer back. Well, they started this fight, and the wall was the weapon of choice to hit them back." I thought that was a really powerful message, like talking about, who gets the right to have these billboards, to have these signs, to have these advertising. So basically it's, corporations with the money are the ones, and have the law behind them to be able to say these things. And so he's saying, how did the common people get their voice out there? And, graffiti is one of the ways. So I came across this shot of him in his studio. And you'll notice that there are stencils all over the floors. because again, you have to have a really fast method of producing this artwork. So before you get caught doing it. So if you pre-designed everything and then you have stencils cut out, then you can simply place them on the wall, take your spray paint, and it's a lot faster method to do it. The Simpsons do an entire episode where they dedicate it to Banksy. And so this is the opening sequence of it. And if you pay attention during that episode, you'll see a lot of references to Banksy's art in the episode. So his stuff is a lot of stuff like this. Like it's the idea of this is a bear caught in a bear trap. And you're like, oh, how horrible. But then by using Winnie the Pooh, it just, creates much more of an impactful statement. This is, some of his other artwork. I love this one. I really do. These two hippies with their, love and peace signs beating each other up with the signs. He uses contemporary references to get his points across. This one from Pulp Fiction. This is a great one referencing the cave art images. And then so usually when people need to get rid of the street art off buildings, they sandblast them off the walls. So this is showing someone sandblasting off the famous Lascaux cave art. Political, talking about bomb hugger. He has a whole series of children holding the bombs. Slave labor, this one, adding the British flag over top of the sewing machine to do a mixed media piece. But you'll notice that the main artwork is still a stencil. He also really gets into all these rat images. He's got tons of them. And so this one's called Gangster Rap. But I really love the design of this. If you'll notice here, how does he show the one foot of the rat or the one hand on the rat? He reverses them out. Like using stencils, you really have to think about the design quality of it to pull them off. Another series he's really famous for are these balloon girls, and they show up on the walls all the time. Just to give you an idea of a couple other artists, this is C215, totally different style of work here. Much more complicated, but just brilliant in the design work and the combining of all the colors. And again, this was a guy from Paris, and talks about images of portraits on the street to represent street people. So in this one, it's a young girl. In this one, it's a homeless person. And he puts the images, on the side of bus shelters. This one's on the side of a garbage bin to, draw more attention. If the actual person is sitting there next to a garbage bin, you're probably not going to notice them, but you will notice the artwork itself. David Cho is another really well-known street artist. And, the street artists now have become contemporary. So this is a portrait of Barack Obama done in the style of a street artist, but again, now gets to become a contemporary image. This is David Cho did Jay-Z's Linkin Park cover. This is another image of his. And I just wanted to, represent the ladies out there. Lady Pink, again, in the early 2000s was quite well known for her work as well. So then, there's this line between when is it graffiti, when is it vandalism, when is it street art, and then when does it become mainstream? And one of the first people to take street art and make it more fine art was Jean-Michel Basquiat. And again, there's a whole documentaries on this guy as well. So he was a graffiti artist in New York, but he becomes really famous. And his work goes from just being stuff on the street to canvases. So Andy Warhol, who's a really famous American artist, kind of, says, hey, this guy's great. And well, if Andy says you're great, then you're great. And he becomes one of the most celebrated artists. And he was kind of the first to take that style, and all of a sudden his work's on canvases and being sold in galleries. So that he was one of the first to really kind of jump. This image is from the early 1980s. And so the line between street art and fine art kind of disappears. Another one of his, and another one. And then looking at what's happening today, if you have been watching any news at all, there's just been so much about the street art that's been going on. So Banksy, again, still really relevant. So this was just done this year, 2020. This one's called Game Changers. And so it's a play on the word of games. And you'll notice that the young child has discarded his Batman toy, and I think that's Spider-Man, and the idea of them being the superheroes, and instead he's now playing with a nurse. And the idea of who do we think of as our heroes? Well, in the time of a global pandemic, all of a sudden, the frontline workers are the true heroes. And so this was an image that he created, and he gave to the Southampton General Hospital to, thank them for their work, and then the piece will ultimately be auctioned off for the money to go to charity. So again, this wasn't done outside on a wall. This was, done and framed and given to them as a gift. The other thing that he posted, which was kind of funny, is, of course, everyone's working from home. And so this is a picture of his bathroom in his house. And he's taken those rats that he likes to do so much, and he's done them all over his bathroom. And the quote that when he posted the image was, "My wife hates it when I work from home." And then on a more serious note, of course, with the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States that, really took hold after the death of George Floyd, the street art that came up just with even murals about portraits of him were just incredible. And they just show you the amount of both kind of graphic design and fine art skills. So this was the most famous one because this is at the memorial site in Minneapolis, and these are the artists that produced the work together. So you can see how they've combined their different styles. So you get all these figures within the lettering that are very, more kind of street art, graphic designy, but then the portrait itself starts to get more fine art. And you can just Google George Floyd murals, and it's incredible the amount of artwork that will come up with that search. And if you just watching CNN and watching the protests, and you can see that the graffiti is everywhere. Like, how do you get this message out? And I noticed in Washington, when you're watching people near Lafayette Park, all the concrete walls and everything have now been covered with graffiti. So that idea of looking at its original source as political statements in Pompeii, way back, in like 70 AD, and now in 2020, this is still the message that the people, media, that the people use to get their messages out.